and maybe crafter. Today I'm gonna make a customized TV tray for my husband who really likes the game Death Stranding. And when I say he really likes Death Stranding, I mean this is his go-to game whenever. He has played it through like 3 times easily. So let's get started and see how it comes out. So the first thing I had to do is I taped off my edges. I'd like to say it's because I thought the staining of the tray would complement the planned design, but honestly, I just didn't want to paint the entire tray again. That was an ordeal. The tray is dark and slightly slippery, so I applied gesso so I wouldn't have to apply as many coats of the top coat, and so the paint would stick better. And honestly, when you put gesso on, it also makes the colors pop better, I think. I drew my very detailed landscape or horizon line, and then I drew in my river, my little rocks, and little details such as that. I took a while drawing the little rocks because I wanted lots of little rocks, and I had every intention of hand drawing these rocks. Spoiler alert, I did not hand draw and paint the rocks. I did do my mountains, and they look real pretty right here as I draw them out with my pencil, and then I began painting. I wanted to recreate the kind of dark atmosphere of Death Stranding by having the sky look really dark and gray and overcast. I just used swirly paint technique. Yes, it's very technical. Basically swirled the brush around to give it a kind of swirly texture. And I had to make sure that I edged around the mountains and didn't paint over them, because heaven help me if I had to try to recreate my pencil drawing. So I had the brilliant idea to do shading on the mountains, but forgot that I suck at shading. I spent 30 minutes trying to shade and get the look I wanted, then another 20 trying to fix the mess I made. You can see the panic setting in here. Notice as my hand starts moving more frenetically as I paint, as I'm trying to fix what I have wrought. Then I'm just like, screw it, and I'll just paint the mountain black. Then I got the idea to use my beauty blender, which has never actually touched makeup, to save the mountains. Sponged gray on top of the black, and it actually created a nice mottled effect, like I did it on purpose. I used UV resin to make the upside down rainbow. I chose UV resin because I could cure it instantly so the colors wouldn't run and I could shape it into an actual rainbow. Not really possible for 2-part epoxy resin that takes at least a day to cure, because by the time that had cured, all the colors would have run together and it would have been a big globby mess. For the larger areas, I did use 2-part epoxy resin since it's stronger and better for larger areas. UV resin shrinks as you cure it, and it's not as strong as epoxy, so it's not great for like big projects like this. Once I finished pouring, I used a latex spatula to spread it around into the corners. I used my trusty heat gun to pop the bubbles. It's so satisfying seeing the surface clear as the bubbles pop. You definitely want to wear your protective gear when working with resin because using a heat gun causes fumes to come up from the resin and it creates kind of like a toxic cloud of death. I'm not saying this from experience or anything. It's not like I've created a huge resin cloud of death that we then all had to leave the house and open all the windows and doors to air out or anything. I made the clouds out of air-dry clay. Bet you'd love to see how I made these. Well, too bad, I forgot to record it. Essentially, I had a big mass of air-dry clay and I pulled chunks off and then picked at the chunks until they resembled clouds. I let the resin cure till it was sticky and then I placed the clouds so they wouldn't move or float later. Because as anybody who's worked with resin has learned, if you put something that can float and you pour a layer of resin on top of it, it will float and not stay in the position that you originally wanted it to be. I used a light blue Posca to draw in the water effects. I chose to do this on the first layer of resin because then it would create a shadow 3D effect. I really liked how, if you look at it in person, you can see the shadow of white lines on the blue paint under the resin. It really does create kind of a watery, shadowy effect, like you'll see if you go to a place that has really clear water, like in a stream, and you can actually see shadows on the stuff under the water. I got the idea to draw the grass in individual strands on the first layer. I chose different colors of green. It turned out pretty neat, though not exactly how I imagined. It took a million years to draw each individual blade though, especially having to do it 3 times. After a century of grass painting, I used a white Posca to do contrasting lines on the water, and you'd be able to see it if I wasn't left-handed and had my big fat hand in the way. And here we go with more grass painting. I used a gray paint wash to paint my clouds so that they wouldn't be so bright. If you've watched or played Death Stranding, you'll know that this is a very dark game and it's not all about happy fun times. Everything is very dark, the sky is never blue, it always looks overcast, so we can't have big white cotton candy clouds in the sky. So it's supposed to be an overcast sky, so I needed them to be darker, but I wanted it to look wispy and not solid black, hence the paint wash. So Hubs wanted chiral crystals from the game to show up on his tray. They look like hands. I suck at making hands. I did my best, following some tutorials I've seen from other YouTubers like North of the Border, who, let me tell you, if you want to see some really cool model making, go watch his channel. True to form, I made a bunch off camera, because it's not like you're here to watch me actually make the stuff or anything. Try to keep it professional, you know? I had them sticking straight up before I realized, wait, these have to go under the next layer. So I had to readjust. Death Stranding likes its rocks and boulders. I decided it would be cool if the rocks were 3D, so I made them out of polymer clay. I wanted to make them out of real rocks, but we couldn't find any that were flat enough to where they wouldn't stick out of the resin. And if you're trying to make this as a TV tray, it's hard to eat if you got rocks jabbing up under your plates and stuff. I wanted to make sure they were flat enough to stay under the resin surface, so I pushed globs of clay onto the surface, shaped it into a vague rock shape, and then used the very technical measurement of look at it, squish a little more, and hope to goodness it's thin enough technique. The fun part was, once I got them down, trying to peel them back off while maintaining their shape so I could bake them, and realizing what horrible residue they leave behind. Fun times. Here's where I got the bright idea to use my razor blade tool to try and scrape them up, so maybe I'd get them up without losing the shape. This worked on some of them really well. There's not so much. After 30 minutes in the oven, the rocks and chiral crystals are ready for painting. enjoy the blurry footage of me painting chiral crystals. I could not get the camera focus no matter what I did. The chiral crystals now get a layer of gold paint on top of the yellow. Doing a yellow base coat helps the gold stand out without a million layers needed. I made a paint wash for the rocks to get them depth and so they look more like rocks and not just gray blobs of clay, which they are. I positioned all my freshly painted rocks and then ended up super gluing them down so that they wouldn't float once again when I poured the next layer of resin. I started drawing Sam. I had to look up so many pictures on how to draw a person from the back walking. I'm still not sure it looks right, and I drew it and wiped it off with alcohol so many times. I added some little extras in the distance from the game that Hubs especially wanted, like a timefall shelter. Yes, the clouds required shaving. I made them too thick and they were poking through the resin layers. I added some little details to Sam, and I am especially proud of these, like his leg straps, the bars and things on the packages, and the straps to keep the packages to his harness. Just the little details like that, and the folds in his clothes, the things that make it look a lot more finished. So that was the process of making the Death Stranding tray, and now it's time for the reveal.